Well, these are live pictures coming into us from Damascus, from the Free Syrian Army. For those of you joining us here on Al Jazeera, several bomb blasts across Damascus have today killed some of President Bashar al-Assad's inner circle. Not only have politicians and ministers been killed and hurt, but also the 4th Brigade Command Building, which houses certainly the unit that is entrusted to defend the capital. These are supporters of the Free Syrian Army, residents of one part of Damascus. It's not all like that. We're also hearing and seeing images of certain suburbs where there is street-to-street fighting between pro and anti-government forces. With me in the studio is our correspondent, Cal Perry, who's been monitoring what's been going on throughout the day. Let's bring up what Robert first also mentioned with me about the 4th Brigade Command Building. That was another location bombed, and how significant that is to what's been going on today.
Well, certainly this is the unit that Bashar al-Assad relies on to protect the capital, to protect the presidential palace. And right now I think we're going to see two things tonight. We're going to see a violent reaction from the government, certainly against the Free Syrian Army. But inside the palace, I think it's likely that Bashar al-Assad is looking around the room and for the first time questioning who he can trust. This is a man who's been in complete control for decades. This is a man who has struck fear into the citizens of Syria for decades, and now probably a man who's for the first time feeling fear himself.
As you say, feeling fear himself, and perhaps people will feel fear. That there's been a lot of talk in the last few weeks about chemical weapons and lots of supposition and rumour. I mean, how much substance is there to that, Cal?
Well, I think this is going to be a key question. We're waiting for the White House press briefing, which is going to be sometime in the next hour. I spoke to a senior U.S. military official, and here's the quote he's given to Al Jazeera. He says, quote, "The idea that these weapons could fall into the hands of Lebanese Hezbollah or other Iranian proxy groups is very concerning to us. We are constantly planning to provide the president options to react to the crisis, and we will be ready to execute whatever the president asks to help secure the region and our partners in the region." Now, reading between the lines, our partners in the region, clearly that's Israel. Israel is going to be watching these pictures just as the U.S. Defense Department is going to be watching these pictures. The concern that maybe the command and control structure is starting to fall apart is definitely going to be a concern. You can expect that this is going to be addressed in the White House press briefing. How to secure these chemical weapons is going to be very difficult. The U.S. certainly does not want to put boots on the ground, at least not publicly. So who will secure the weapons? And you can bet Israel does not want these weapons falling into the hands of whomever are carrying these guns on the streets of Damascus.
Well, it does seem then, if you say reading between the lines, that the Americans are absolutely certain that chemical weapons in whatever form and in whatever amount do exist in Syria. Who has supplied them?
Well, that's the real question here. I think the supposition inside the Defense Department has been that these originated from Russia years ago, but certainly this senior U.S. military official confirming that chemical weapons certainly are believed to be on the ground. This is of major concern to the U.S. government. It's the devil you know, and for the U.S. and for Israel and for other countries, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. That has been Bashar al-Assad. They know that those chemical weapons have been secured, but if the capital falls, the palace goes down, where do those chemical weapons end up? That's certainly going to be a nightmare scenario for the White House.
That would be a nightmare scenario for them in terms of what's been going on today. If we just recap for our viewers, I mean, these pictures started to arrive at the news centre around about 2 hours ago. We weren't quite sure what was going on in Damascus. We were hearing reports of bombings. We haven't seen any live pictures of the areas that have been hit. So it's very difficult to know exactly how many people have been injured. We know who's been killed. In terms of the inner circle, big questions about Bashar al-Assad's own security. And as Robert Fisk has mentioned, as Rula Amin, our correspondent in Beirut, has talked about, this notion that the inner circle is crumbling.
That's, I think, the biggest fear for President Assad. Robert Fisk mentioned this earlier. There have to be funerals now for the individuals that were killed today. How do you secure those funerals? How are people going to react on the streets to those funerals? is this protest going to get bigger? And as night falls, how is the government going to react? Certainly, I think people in Damascus tonight are going to be very fearful, knowing that this bombing took place, knowing that it took out a family member of President Bashar al-Assad. How is the 4th Battalion going to react? Are they going to be let loose through the city? We've heard our correspondent Nisreen Al-Shmeila in Amman talking about people carrying knives, going building to building. That's incredibly terrifying. And for the first time, Syrian state television broadcasting images of some kind of combat going on, some kind of armed conflict going on inside urban areas of Damascus. That is a turning point. Syria will never be the same yesterday as it will be tomorrow.
And how important do you think it has been for him to try and find replacements for those that have been killed? And so quickly he managed to replace his defense minister.
He has to show people, the supporters that he has remaining across the country, that the command and control structure is still in place. So the immediate appointment of somebody else shows that maybe the government was prepared for this, shows that the government has the ability to handle these types of attacks. They've gone out of their way to make the Free Syrian Army appear as though it's a ragtag army, to make it appear as though they don't know what they're doing or that they're a band of Islamic terrorists. Today, for the first time, we've seen a strike at the family, at the command and control structure. Certainly the government is trying to figure out how to deal with this. We have not seen a direct reaction to this. We're seeing open protests on the streets of Damascus against the regime and no reaction from the army as of yet.
And it certainly, as you say, asks the question and begs the question about how we define the Free Syrian Army. You say, in those initial first few weeks, 16 months ago, ragtag group of people, disaffected civilians. Now we're seeing an attack in 2 certainly major locations, very, very specific, very well planned. What does this now tell us about the way the Free Syrian Army is working and maybe who might be supporting them?
Well, I think it tells us that they're learning on the ground as they're fighting. They're certainly getting better. Their tactics are getting better. I think it also raises the question of in what condition is the Syrian army, the people that are supporting Bashar al-Assad. We've heard from people who have defected in the past, colonels and generals, that there are people staying within the Syrian army to help the Free Syrian Army, that rather than defecting, they're choosing to stay in their positions to help the Free Syrian Army.
In terms of what we can expect overnight now, you were saying about people being fearful. Can Assad really justify a bloodbath? I mean, I know we're hoping that won't happen, but it's a real worry, and we know this sort of thing has happened before. Robert was talking about the uprising in the early 80s. These things do happen with this particular government.
This is a man who has to show that he is still in control, that he can still carry this country forward. He's got to send a message. In what form that message is certainly a key question. These are, as you look at these live pictures in Damascus, these are bold protests. We have not seen protests like this inside the capital in the past 16 months. The message that he sends tonight is going to have to be clear as to whether or not he can still control the situation. This is now becoming a battle of hearts and minds. It's becoming a PR battle.
Okay, for the moment, Cal, thanks for keeping us on top of what's actually going on. You'll be monitoring events for us throughout the day here on Al Jazeera.